Let's look at one more. Proverbs 1 and verse 15. Proverbs 1:15. It says, "My son, walk not thou in the way with them, refrain thy foot from their path." Refrain thy foot from the path of these communists that want you to cast your lot among them and all have one purse and swallow up the innocent without cause and so on, to basically murder people and take their stuff and then divide the spoils, allegedly. Solomon says here, refrain from their path. Walk not with them. Now, I'd say Solomon was a wise teacher because you notice how he goes about things. He first, in verse 10, warns his son not to consent when enticed by sinners. "My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not." So he first of all just gives him the warning. My son, if you get enticed by sinners, don't consent to it. I haven't even told you what they're doing yet. I haven't given you the reasons for it, but I'm just going to warn you ahead of time. Don't do it. And then he moves on from there. Then he gives him a detailed example of what the enticement might sound like, and that was verses 11 through 14. "If they say, 'Come with us, let us lay wait for blood. Let us lurk privily for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them up alive as the grave, and whole as those that go down into the pit. We shall find all precious substance. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in thy lot among us. Let us all have one purse.'" So now they know what the enticement might sound like. So he first warns them about it. Then he gives them an example of what it could be. And then next he reiterates his warning not to walk with them and to refrain from their path. So he tells them. Then he gives them a reason for telling them, and then he tells them again. That's wise teaching there. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And then finally, he tells them why to steer clear of such sinners, because their end is destruction, verses 16 through 19. "For their feet run to evil, and make haste to shed blood. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. And they lay wait for their own lives, they lurk privily. They lay wait for their own blood, they lurk privily for their own lives. So are the ways of everyone that is greedy of gain, which taketh away the life of the owners thereof." So verse 18 lets us know what's going to happen to these guys. The lives that they're actually laying wait for are their own, because God is going to turn this thing around, and they're going to be the ones that end up getting what they tried to do to other people. So he first of all warns them, then he gives them an example of what he's talking about, then he reiterates his warning, and then he tells them why. Here's why you don't want to do that, because it's not going to end well. And we can glean an important lesson from the order in which Solomon instructs his son here. First of all, it's essential to do what God commands us before we endeavor to understand why he commanded it. We don't need to know all the whys and wherefores. We just need to know what he says, do what he says, and then try to figure out the why if we're so inclined. Once we do what God commands, then we can seek to know the Lord's reason for issuing the instruction. For instance, it's not necessary for a Christian to understand exactly why he needs to flee fornication. He just needs to do it, right? And you can figure out why later, right? You just steer clear of that, and then once you've done what God says, then he's free to philosophize about why God might have given that precept. And I know I've told you this story before, but in fact, I'm going to tell it again right now. I had a certain person that I knew in my life outside the church, and he was living, turns out I asked him how things are going, I hadn't talked to him for a long time. He's like, "Oh, my girlfriend and I have 3 kids or whatever, and da-da-da." And I said, "Well, sounds like you need to get married." And he professes to be some kind of a Christian. And he's like, "Well, I've always wondered why God, said that, we should," I don't know, he didn't say abstain from fornication, boy, we should get married before, or whatever. And I just wondered, is it because of societal things, or, if, it's better for children that way, or what? And da-da-da, he's going on and on. And I said, and I responded back with this: you need to do what God says, and then you can ask the whys and try to figure out, and there are good reasons for it, certainly, because it does really mess up society when you got single-parent homes and all that. But do what he said, and then ask why. A lot of times, children of God too often act like parents of children who allow their kids to question the command before they consent to doing it. And I recommend that with parenting, especially when your kids are young, that you shouldn't have to explain why they need to do certain things. Now, if they're older and you're 17 or something, then I don't think it makes sense just do it because I said it. Like, you should probably give them a reason because they're getting to the age where they're almost an adult, and I think it's reasonable to give them a reason for it. But especially when they're younger, they don't need a reason. The younger they are, the less reasons they need. And, God doesn't put up with that kind of thing where you have to understand everything before I obey. He didn't put up with that rebellion, and neither should we. As they say, delayed obedience is disobedience. And I've got some friends down in the Lakeland church. They used to be in the Cincinnati church years ago, and I learned from them, and their kids were pretty little back then, that they taught their kids that whenever they tell them to do something, they had to do it immediately, and then once they've done it, then they can come back and ask why. And they would explain why. But they wanted to teach them, when I tell you to do something, you do it. I don't want, well, why do I have to do that? No, you don't ask me why. You do what I told you to do, right? And that worked out really well for them. So.
Judy and I saw something like that at Walmart the other night. Remember that, Judy? We was talking, I made a comment about that. That girl, we walked out of the store and we was getting ready to go across the roadway, and the little girl, maybe about 2 or 3 years old, was running out. And mother said, stop, and she stopped. And I told Judy, I said, she's been taught some manner.
Yeah.
And she stopped right there. And she went for her mother. Mother grabbed her hand, they walked across the road.
That's right.
Yeah.
It can, if for no other reason, your child's safety could be at hazard for that reason. If they get accustomed to you saying stop or you saying something, and they say, well, why? And he's running out in front of the car, and you say stop, and he goes, well, why do I need to do that? Splat. So yeah, it's, if for no other reason, keep them alive. And then Solomon says, walk not thou in the way with them, refrain thy foot from their path. These bloodthirsty communists, as I just showed in the last part, are so dangerous that a man dare not even walk with them nor put his foot on their path. There's certain people that you just want to stay completely clear of. They're just dangerous people, and you don't want to be anywhere near them. And these types are certainly some such. Solomon later warned his son just to stay completely clear of wicked people in Proverbs 4:14 through 17. And as I read down through verse 17, we're going to see that this is a description, basically, of these same guys in Proverbs chapter 1, very similar. He says, enter not into the path of the wicked. Go not in the way of evil men. Avoid it, pass not by it, turn from it, and pass away. You see guys like this? Don't even go near them. Don't even walk past them. Figuratively speaking, right? You don't even want to. You see guys like this on the sidewalk. You want to cross over on the other side and walk way away from them. Turn from it. Turn around, go the other way. Pass away. For they sleep not, except they have done mischief, and their sleep is taken away, unless they cause some to fall. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. And that's these guys right there, just laying in wait for blood, robbing the innocent without cause. Steer clear of people like that. J. Adams said in his book Competent Counsel on page 134, he said, to keep from falling over the edge of the precipice, one should move as far back from that edge as possible. I don't like living life on the edge. I might used to have before my conversion being a fool, but I don't like walking right up to the edge. If I could have a beer and a half and not be intoxicated, you know what? I'm just going to have one, right? I don't like walking right up next to that edge. I don't like living foolishly like that. I don't think that's a good thing to do. You want to be very careful who you follow, because many are walking that broad way that leadeth to destruction. Matthew 7:13 through 14. The majority of the people in this world are not on the way of righteousness. They are on the pathway to destruction. Matthew chapter 7:13 through 14. Enter ye in at the strait gate. Straight like a straight jacket, like something that's constricted. For wide is the gate and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat. The broad way leads to destruction. Where are the shows shown in New York City on Broadway, right? Broadway Road, right? Broadway Street. I just think that it's interesting. Broad is the way that leadeth to destruction. A lot of Hollywood is on the broad way, that's for sure. Because straight is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. You guys think you're right and everybody else is wrong. Yeah, pretty much. Not everybody's wrong, but the majority of people are, right? I mean, look around in the world and look at churches and look at, what calls itself Christianity out there, and then the vast majority of it is wrong on just about everything. There's a few things here and there that they're right on, but yeah, the majority of the world is not on that straight and narrow way. John said, that very thing, that little children, we are of God, and the whole world lieth in wickedness. It's not arrogant to say that most of the world is going the wrong way, right? And but for the grace of God, so would we. We'd be right there with Him if God hadn't intervened in our lives. And pray that He continues to keep us on the straight and narrow way, because we could fall off that way just as easily as anybody else. And I know people, you all know people, that have been on the straight and narrow road and just veered right off that thing completely into a ditch. And we could be there just like them. So we always want to be mindful and careful how we walk in this world. Following the wrong crowd could cost you your money. Let's look at Proverbs 28:29. It could cost you three things. First of all, it could cost you your money. Proverbs 28:19 says, "He that tilleth his land shall have plenty of bread." You just go out there and work. Work hard and save money. You'll be all right. "But he that followeth after vain persons shall have poverty enough." You got that get-rich-quick scheme. Invest $1,000 with me, and that thing's going to be worth a fortune in no time. Hey, buy some Bitcoin off of me. It's at 20,000 right now. It's going to be at $1 million next year, right? What's it at now? 3,000? I haven't been paying attention to it, but yeah. You called me up about your buddy that wanted to invest in Bitcoin. Yeah. I think it was when it was at about 17 or 20,000. I said, boy, I wouldn't do that. No way. And it turned out to be a pretty good call.
Yeah, he did like $50 or something.
Oh, so
he's his first time investing in something. He's still riding it. He checks it every day.
Oh, yeah.
It's gone up and down a little. He's not really hasn't made anything or lost anything. He's having fun with it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you just don't want to put your life savings into it.
No,
yeah.
He's not stupid.
Yeah. So following the wrong crowd could cost you your money, or it could cost you your well-being. Proverbs 16 and verse 29. Proverbs 16:29. It's always good. You never do this with investments, but you can always, like, when you look at a chart of the stock market or a certain investment, Bitcoin or whatever. When you look at a short-term chart and you see it's kind of going up and it looks like it's a nice trajectory, the thing to do, I think, before you make any investment is look back at 10 years or something. Because then if you can see, because you look at before the blow off and the crash usually happens, right at the end, that thing's going, in a 10-year chart, it's going vertical. And you look back, you're like, well, how couldn't I have seen that? The thing's going straight up. Of course it can't go up, like that for very long. But at the time, it doesn't look like it. So it's always a good time, if you're going to buy into anything, look at the chart over 10 years and see, boy, right now, is it going vertical? Because if it's going vertical, it's going to be going vertical the other way very soon. So that's kind of like with Bitcoin. The slope of Bitcoin was pretty much completely horizontal and just completely off the charts. And chances are, you're buying into something like that, it's probably not going to end well. But anyway, Proverbs 16 and verse 29. Could cost you your well-being. It says, "A violent man enticeth his neighbor and leadeth him into the way that is not good. If sinners entice thee, consent thou not." They'll lead you into a way that's not good. That's going to be harmful to your well-being. Look at Matthew 15:24.
14.
Matthew 15:14. That's what I meant to say. Matthew 15:14. Jesus said concerning the Pharisees, "Let them alone. They be blind, leaders of the blind, and if the blind shall lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch." Remind me after the study, I got something I want to tell you about the blind leading the blind. But Anyway, remind me, I'll tell you later. So following the wrong crowd could cost you your money. It could cost you your well-being. You could end